Welcome everybody. Good morning. My name is Bill Schower, and today we're doing today's installment of the ResearchUVA powered by Huron training series focused on the agreements module and requesting non-funded agreements, clinical trials, and subawards within the agreements module. So we're going to walk through some general training tips, outline some of the resources that are available to you all on the ResearchUVA powered by Huron website. We are going to do a trainer-led demo of a few requesting a incoming MTA, and we're going to show you some of the functionality within how to navigate within the agreements module itself, as well as requesting a subaward. So after that, we are going to break after the demonstration and do some sort of hands-on exercises where folks can practice within the stage site to get a little bit more familiar with what we're going to show you in the demonstration itself. That part should probably be, so we'll go into breakout rooms for that, and that'll be a little bit more collaborative than us just presenting to you all. So let's start with a bit of introductions. Like I said, my name is Bill Schower. I'm a senior contract negotiator in OSP, and I am assigned to negotiating or signing contracts for all the school's units outside of the School of Medicine. And my favorite feature within the Huron, the ResearchUVA powered by Huron agreements module is the fact that all of the agreements are consolidated essentially in one module, and they have a consistent workflow that is a little bit more user-friendly, I think. Whereas in ResearchUVA, we had built up different features over time, and they weren't always consistent, or you had to go to the various eSPAR, ENFA, EPRF to find what you were trying to do for agreements. For myself, having everything in one place, in one module is very helpful. Who else would like to introduce themselves?
Well, there's only two of us, so I guess I'll go next. I'm Matt Winter. I'm an OSP subawards. Keep it short and sweet. My favorite agreements feature is probably the signature routing through DocuSign. Signature process can take, a long time currently due to some, just having to use what we have. So having a tool like the DocuSign feature through Huron is pretty great.
Asa, it's hard to hear you. You're coming in kind of faint.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was hoping to be able to introduce you myself, but I'll let you do it.
You want to introduce me?
No, go ahead.
I'm Asa Lopatin. I'm a senior contract negotiator who I represent a lot of departments inside of School of Medicine. And my favorite agreements feature is, I would say, ancillary review, probably because it's a great example of how many of the features and functions of this new system are designed to promote transparency and to allow us to complete different tasks inside of the system. So we will show you a little bit about how that works, but you'll see both why I like it and why it's such a good example of that overall philosophy of this platform.
Okay, a few nuts and bolts. Try to stay muted when you're not speaking, just so we don't get any background noise. We are recording this just because we'll show you in a few minutes. This will get posted to the website for others that aren't able to join. We also have noticed that we're going to stay on video, but if you're not one of the presenters, we suggest taking yourself off video, just so that since we have a fair amount of folks on the call, we found that we have bandwidth issues when too many folks are on video. If you do have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them live in the chat. If not, we will definitely follow up afterwards to make sure we get your questions answered. And lastly, I alluded to this earlier, but we'll go into the breakout rooms at the end of the demonstration, and in those will be a little bit more collaborative, as I mentioned, and you can feel free to ask questions if you get stuck when you're going through the exercises. Okay, so first thing I want to highlight is all of the various resources and support that we've worked to create to help the transition process. I think moving to a new system has its challenges, but to help everyone with that and help everyone to get comfortable with the new and exciting features within ResearchUVA powered by Huron. First and foremost, we've developed a specific site. Is everyone are you able to see that from dragging it on? Okay. So the VPR's office has the ResearchUVA powered by Huron website. This has a lot of great details, and it's important to note that this is continually updated as we record more of these training sessions and develop more guides. This is going to be updated with even more content. So a few things to highlight on the site, just to give a quick plug. There's a great timeline document that demonstrates what the current timeline is for the soft launch that we are planning April 25th. Also, for folks in the field, I think this will be really helpful. This will give you a detailed table about sort of, I'm looking to do XYZ today, how do I do that? Which system am I engaging with? So I think that should be really helpful for folks in the field to take a look at, and encourage you to take a look there. There's also on the resources link, this is where I mentioned there's going to be videos, PowerPoints, job aids, reference guides. A lot of great content is going to be posted on here as it's getting finalized. And lastly, we have a frequently asked question. We try to put basically any questions that we're getting, we're trying to answer those up here whenever possible. So if you do have questions, take a look here before you try to find it somewhere else. So a lot of that good content will be posted there. The other thing in terms of support to highlight, I think, is obviously the instructor-led training sessions that we're in now. Encourage you to join any others as they're coming up in the next few weeks. There is office hours that are going to be held, virtual office hours, Monday through Friday during business hours from the 25th of April, which is the soft launch go live, until May 6th. And the purpose there is really, I have a proposal, I have an action that I need to submit in the system, and I need help with getting that where it needs to go based on a deadline. I don't really have time to, go through and look at job aids and reference guides. I sort of need immediate help, and that will help folks essentially keep their actions moving once we hit the go live date on the 25th. The last thing I want to highlight as far as resources is obviously the help desk support. So there's an email there for, and that's primarily intended for technical support when you run into IT problems. That should be your first step for getting assistance if you're having trouble logging on or any sort of technical IT issues. As of the 25th, though, everyone with a UVA email will have access to the system. So not anticipating major issues, but if you are encountering any IT issues, feel free to send that, and that'll get routed first to OSP's info team. Okay, so let's talk about what's changing, what's staying the same. I think in terms of staying the same, the biggest takeaways are essentially that the system is intended to reflect UVA's current business processes, policies, requirements, and a lot of those are imposed on UVA from sponsors or UVA policy, and that's not going to change or anything by implementing a new system. All of that remains the same, as well as the normal support from OSP or from if you're in a school that has submission authority, the pre-award offices from your schools, all of that remains the same, and your OSP point of contact as a result of this rollout does not change either. So all of that kind of support infrastructure remains in place, and mainly what we're changing is the streamlining the system that people are going to interact with, and allowing adding a lot of improvements as far as communication and understanding where an action is in the process. So with that, what's changing? The request process, this was my favorite feature, was basically you have a one-stop shop for requesting agreements. You can go to the agreements module and request anything from a non-funded agreement to a clinical trial agreement. And all of that is in one place. There's also really good visibility with determining the status of your agreement once it's been requested and submitted to OSP, and tracking as it goes through the negotiation. There's really good information as far as who is it with and what's the latest that's happened. Have there been correspondence back and forth or a phone call, or lots of good information to help folks from either the PI project study team or the field to understand where things are. From an OSP perspective, there's also a lot of goodies in there that will help us to better do our job in terms of tracking various terms that we have accepted, communicating within the system as opposed to dropping emails, files into the record, storing templates that will help us to quickly generate an agreement using information that was uploaded into the system. As Matt alluded to, the DocuSign integration to quickly sign things, as well as I think more user-friendly linkages between the funding proposals, awards, and agreements. And a lot of that we'll demo in terms of the managed relationships functionality, where each of the funding proposal, award, and agreement can be linked very clearly, and you can kind of toggle back and forth when they are connected. Okay, so I think we've sort of already covered this. We are gonna, in terms of the demos, we're gonna initiate an incoming agreement. Asa is gonna demonstrate some of the navigation tools. Matt's gonna demonstrate some of the initiation of an outgoing subaward, and then we're going to move to the breakout rooms. So high level, just workflow diagram. This is the part that I'm going to focus on, the creation of the agreement. Once it gets submitted to OSP, it will go through the in review, the negotiation piece. Then the language gets finalized and we'll go through, there's some built-in flexibility in terms of the routing for signature process. So from a high level, that's sort of the various stages that the agreement can go through. So one of the things that I mentioned in terms of the consolidation within the agreements module is the various agreement types and who is going to be initiating those agreements. So on this chart, on this table, we have the various acronyms and agreement types that we've created. We've carried over much of the agreement types that we had in the ENFA system, but we've also sort of tweaked that in places where we thought it would be useful based on what we've seen over the past few years from the ENFA system. So not going to go through each and every one of these, but I do want to highlight one piece that you'll see here. The vast majority of this goes through and the research community member. So whether that's the PI, the study staff, or the departmental administrator is the one that's going to be requesting that agreement. There's a slightly different process for a sponsored research agreement, and that's because OSP is involved in the creation of the award that's connected to the funding proposal. So OSP sort of starts that process, which is similar to the current state where OSP will generate a notice of award action in Legacy ResearchUVA. Similarly, OSP will create a award action and kick off a sponsored research agreement when there is a funded agreement that is being requested. So here's just the rest of the agreement types. And yeah, the only other one here that OSP might be involved in is a master agreement, and that's basically just a reflection of the relative complexity involved with a master agreement, maybe OSP requesting it or a member of the research community. Okay, so those are all of the agreement types that we've created. Next, we're going to shift to the live demonstration. And we've already covered that, what that will entail. Lastly, just a quick preview of the hands-on exercise where folks will have a chance to initiate an incoming agreement, whether that's a non-funded agreement or a clinical trial agreement, depending on what office or school you support. You know, you'll have some flexibility, and essentially we'll create rooms, breakout rooms for non-funded agreements, clinical trial agreements, and the creation of outgoing subawards. So folks can bounce between rooms and test out a few different exercises to get more comfortable with the system, but more on that once we finish our live demos. So quick plug, just as I mentioned earlier, we're hosting a lot of these training sessions in the next few weeks as we head towards the go live date. And so encourage everyone to attend funding proposal basics, budgets, system to system submission, and awards, depending on your workflow. Also, as I noted, if you are not able to join, we're going to be posting recordings of those to the ResearchUVA Powered by Huron website on the VPR site. So if you want to watch one after the fact, certainly encourage you to do so. Okay, Anything I've missed from my esteemed colleagues? No? I'm seeing no. Okay. All right. Well, let's shift then to a live demo. Okay. All right, so here's the ResearchUVA powered by Huron demo site that I'm going to take you through the creation of an incoming MTA. So Asa made a good point that the way we're doing this is sort of like a cooking show where I'm going to kind of show you the ingredients and then we're going to sort of fast forward and he's going to voila, pull out a beautiful cake out of the oven and we'll demonstrate sort of what the agreement looks like once it's been activated. So you can think of the first part of this demo as one MTA agreement at various stages. We're sort of going to fast forward through the OSP negotiation part. And then Matt's going to work on the initiation of a outgoing subaward. So the first part that I want to highlight is the three different tabs here in the upper left. And these are the various modules that users have access to within the system. The dashboard really quickly is just things that you're assigned to that you as a user either people have requested that you perform some task or an agreement draft is currently assigned to you. Those are the sort of things that you're going to find in the agreement. So ideally, on a day-to-day basis, you go to the dashboard and sort of say, okay, well, here's the queue of things that I need to work on. We're going to be, obviously, there's the grants module. Those will be focused on in other presentations for creating funding proposals, system-to-system submissions, that sort of material. Today, we're going to focus on the agreements module. And in terms of creating, the first step for creating a incoming MTA we're going to do today, there's a few different ways within the system that you can create an agreement. I'm going to show you, there's sort of three ways, and two of them are more or less interchangeable, and then Matt's going to demo the third way. So the first two are basically that you can either from the dashboard create an agreement here by clicking on the create button, and then within agreements, click the create agreement. The other thing, and this will lead you to the same steps, so it's no different in terms of what the outcome is. It's just a navigation thing. If you happen to be in the agreements module and you want to create from there, there's really no difference. So I'm going to click the create agreement button from the agreements module, and we're going to start from here on this smart page is what we call them, and it's going to request a series of questions, information from the user about what agreement we're requesting and administrative details regarding the agreement itself. One other piece that I want to highlight here is we're in a stage site here, so I'm able to sort of impersonate a user to create various agreements. So today I'm impersonating Angela Rogers to create this agreement. Obviously, when the system goes live, everyone will have a user account within ResearchUVA powered by Huron that's specific to them. So this is really just for the purposes of demonstration, that I can show you what this looks like as a member of the department. All right, so first question asks us for the agreement manager, the PI. So we are going to enter in, let's see, Christopher Moscola. excuse me, on that name. So in terms of these search bars, a few things I want to mention first. So if you start to type in the name, you're going to get kind of a preview splash page that's going to show you the most, a subset of the names that you're going to see. Now, if I were doing Smith, for example, a more common name, you may not see all of the people with the last name Smith, if that's the name of the PI that you're searching for. So what you do then is you would want to go click on the ellipsis and go to this browse page, and that's going to give you a much more complete search criteria that allows you to search on these various filters. So if you were looking for Smith, for example, you could search based on that and then scroll through to find that name. So just because the takeaway there is just because you don't see it on this splash page doesn't mean that it's not in the system. You should then go to click on the ellipsis to find it. So I'm going to enter in the PI's name here. Note that the administrative contact here defaults to the individual that is submitting the request. That is changeable. I will note that if you do change it, you may have issues with accessing the agreement itself if you are no longer the administrative contact because of the way that the system generates the access to an agreement. So if you are planning, so I don't encourage you to change this unless you are shifting the responsibility for submitting this to a colleague, if say you're out of the office or something. But if you do, I'll show you a place where you can add your name to ensure that you get, you maintain your access to be able to view the record. If it's within your department, it's likely that departmental wide, you're able to receive access. But if you are sort of crossing over departments, definitely suggest you adding your name to the agreement collaborator section, which we'll show you momentarily. Okay, next, the agreement upload draft. It allows you to either upload a draft or to select that the draft will be generated internally. So we're going to leave that alone for the moment, and then I'm going to show you something that will happen if you don't select it. So the project identifier or the title, and I want to highlight that there are help fields on many of these. If you click on them, you'll get a box that will give you a short description to help you understand what exactly is being requested, how, where it will appear, and how it may be used. So those are very helpful as you're navigating the system. If you're not sure exactly what's being asked and you do see the question mark box, that's a good reference point to use. So today we have the TMNT breeding pair that we are requesting. And number 5 is the agreement type. And this is a really critical point in the agreement request process where you're going to be requesting which type of agreement you want to request. So what we have here is a drop down with the various agreement types. And I think, you know, most of us that have experience with requesting agreements, you know, if you, it can be very clear if they are requesting, say, a pair of mice or say some turtles, that it is going to be a material transfer agreement. Now, it may not be always that clear. And to help people, what we've done is added some hover text The way to access that hover text, though, you have to select the agreement first and then hover over, and it will give you a brief description of what the agreement type is for, to help you identify which agreement you should be selecting. If the incorrect agreement is selected, we do have the capability to change that downstream, but we're hoping that this information here will help you to make the appropriate selection. One other thing to note is, we have all of these various agreement types. Things don't always fit neatly into one bucket or the other. So if you're unsure, you can contact your either a departmental administrator or your OSP contact if it's sort of a very off the beaten path type agreement. We do have the other agreement category as well, just for things that really don't fit into any category. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be working on an MTA, so we're going to select that. So brief description, and this is always useful information for the negotiator to understand what it is that's being requested. Any supporting documents, you can drag and drop files or click the add button to upload those, whether that's any kind of like a scope of work, a data dictionary, any sort of supporting information that you may have that's going to be useful to the to OSP to be able to negotiate the agreement. This is a similar question that is asked on the ENFA, and we carried it over. This is basically to ensure that, well, let's pull up the help text. This is to make sure that we're not looking at something that should be going through procurement, basically. So if the answer here is yes, you'll see here a pop-up that just says this should go to procurement, essentially. So we're going to select no here and continue forward. So what I did there was intentional, and that is to say I did not answer this upload agreement draft question, and you'll see the red star here on the left. That means that it's a required question. As you're moving through these smart pages, you're going to be asked questions that are useful and helpful for us to understand, but there are also ones that are necessary, and those have the red star. So the system won't allow you to move forward. It'll give you an error message if you don't select or answer that question. And this is what's known as a validation error. So in this instance, I didn't upload a draft, or I didn't select that the draft would be generated internally. So for ease of use, we're just going to select that it's going to be generated internally. And now you'll see when I hit the continue button, you're going to move forward to the next screen and not get that error. So the system is checking these validation anytime you're going to move forward on to submission. It will allow you to ensure that all of the appropriate information is included. So once we've gone through that agreement upload page, that's sort of a page that's going to then generate more pages based on the answers that you gave, particularly the agreement type that you requested. So we try to tailor all of the questions that we're asking specific to the agreement type, and that way we're asking the right questions so that we're getting the right information to be able to quickly process and negotiate the agreement. All right, so now we're requesting the counterparty for the agreement. So the other party that we're signing the agreement with. And this is going to be University. Okay. So when you're searching for counterparties, we have seen some folks that have sort of difficulty finding various sponsors in here. These sponsors are fed into the ResearchUVA powered by Huron system through the financial system. So currently through Oracle, through a sponsor table that's in Oracle. So occasionally there are instances like someone would search for NASA, for example, and they're having difficulty finding them as a sponsor. And the natural response is, well, of course we have to have NASA as a sponsor. So if you don't see it on the splash page, again, you're going to search on the select organization page by clicking on the ellipses. Okay, so here we don't have National Aeronautic, and this is where, and we don't see anything coming up with NASA. So it is. I forget what this is. So I think that for NASA, it is a confusing name in the league table, in the sponsor table. So I'll have to find that one. But the point of what I was trying to make is that the % search is your friend. And so when you're searching for the various agencies or sponsors in here, try to use the %. If you're not finding the counterparty in the table after doing a search, you're going to submit this section here where you're going to put the new counterparty name. And what that's going to do is that's going to generate a request to the info team in OSP to create a new sponsor. Sorry, just to follow up, just so we have this on. Okay, so that's what it is. It's under US NASA, which can be counterintuitive. And that's why bracketing your search with percentage term or % signs using the Boolean logic helps to find what it is you're looking for. So I suggest the acronym and the name bracketed by the % signs to find. Thank you. Whoops. Okay, so as I mentioned, the requesting, if you don't see a counterparty, you request it there. Then we're going to ask for the contact name, email, phone. You'll notice that these are not required fields, but there is a sort of quirk in the system that if you don't request some of this, you will get an error if some of the email or phone is not provided. And that's basically because the negotiators need to have either a phone number or an email address. Okay, so the responsible department is going to default to the PI's department in the system. That can be changed, obviously, depending on, you know, if you have a PI that's multiple departments, or if this needs to be changed based on a multi PI agreement. Okay, so the agreement collaborators part, that was the section that I referenced earlier when I talked about if you are changing I think it's the administrative contact. Yes, so if you are the administrative contact and say you need to reassign this to a colleague because you're going to be out, to be able to make sure that you are still accessing the record, I suggest adding yourself as an agreement collaborator. And that will ensure that you can continue to access that record. So I'm just going to click here. Select, and you can, as I did there, you can sort that if you're trying to find a name with a common last name. So now this person, if this were to be changed, Angela would ensure that she maintains access to the record. So if you're looking to add additional counterparties, if there's multi-party agreement, you can add that here. And then this is the request, the address for the counterparty. So if we don't know that, we're going to just continue on with the project information. Okay, so this is just going to request some basic project information that we're going to enter in. And you can quickly navigate through the calendar or just hard coding the dates themselves. And then whether you anticipate there being students working on the project. If you select yes, it will ask you whether they're paid or unpaid, graduate or undergraduate. We're going to select no, though, and continue forward in the Smart Pages. Are there any other UVA faculty or research staff involved? That's going to allow you to add multiple faculty to the agreement. We are going to select no for ease of use here. And this page is basically all of the regulatory questions that you would see in the ENFA that are carried over. Just for ease here, we're going to select no to most of these. But if you do, sorry, that's not a good one to select yes on. If you do select yes, you'll see that there are follow-up boxes that basically request additional information. And we are going to just select not applicable on the rest of those questions. Okay, it's going to move you next to the terms and conditions page. And it's important to note that these are to be completed only by OSP. So that's part of the way that OSP is going to track the terms and conditions associated with the agreement. That was one of the features that I mentioned in the sort of preamble, but from a agreement submission standpoint, this, unless you're in OSP, then you don't need to worry about this at all. And you'll notice that none of these are required questions, so you can just move past them. We're going to ask a series of intellectual property questions. We're going to select no to these. Note that there are some help text on at least one of these, but we are going to move through those and select no. Okay, so the next question that is going to lead to other questions is this sending, receiving, or both? We are going to select receiving, and that is then going to generate a series of other questions that are asked for. Describe the materials, upload a list of the materials, not required, so we're not going to do that. Obviously, if it's available, it's always helpful. Describe the intended use of the materials. I'm going to develop a colony for use in future research projects. Again, upload a description. If there's a scope of work that's more detailed, that's always helpful to have. This is again a MTA specific question on whether or not there's any restrictions or instructions on the use of the material. Since it's receiving, those would be coming from the counterparty. We're going to assume for this that there are not. What sort of security expectations do you have? Again, help text box, enter NA if you don't have a response on this. The reason we say that is because this is a required question. And so there are other follow-up boxes, for example, not on this one, but that are not, well, this one actually is a good example. This is not a required field. So if you don't know that information, or it's not required, or it's not available at the time, then it is not, the system's not going to hold you from moving forward if you don't enter in that one, but this one needs to be entered in. So if there aren't any security expectations, then you need to write NA. However, we're going to say that the provider will send additional information for handling and storage. We don't anticipate creating any derivatives.
Hey, Bill. Quick question about the red number that's showing up in the box. Is that something related to your browser?
Yeah, sorry, that's a some sort of plugin in my browser, so ignore that. That's nothing to do with the system.
Okay, just triple checking. Ian wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. I didn't think about that. This too, ignore that. Okay, so the next question, is it a select agent? I'm going to select no on that. But obviously this is very specific issues, like from CDC. If it is a select agent, then you can go to that website, and that's for toxins, for example. Similarly, you can identify various hazardous biological agents, all sorts of nasty things that we may be receiving. But that's, in this case, not applicable. So we are not going to answer that one. The other thing we're going to ask is, what's the source of the funds to support the activity? And we're going to say that it is SIF funded. Okay, so I'm going to continue on to the next smart page. And this is going to be a few more questions on facilitating the transfer of human subjects. It's not. And does either party require reimbursement of any costs? We are going to say yes. And we'll say $100. Okay. And so that completes that page. Okay. So this is now, we've answered all of the SmartForm questions, and we've moved through, and we have now the completion questions. So once we've gotten to this point, we are going to check to make sure first that this is validated. So you can run that validation to make sure you don't have any errors on required questions that needed to be answered. So I run that, and if you do have an error, it will come up with a red checkbox, and you can then navigate to that page and it will highlight the question that needs to be answered. We do not. So we are going to click finish, and now it's going to take us to this page, which is going to show us that this is in pre-submission. So pre-submission does not mean that it has been quote unquote assigned over to OSP. So it's still, I'm as the user, Angela Rogers here, and it's still editable in this pre-submission state. So I haven't essentially sent this forward for PI certification or for school submitting office approval to submit to OSP. As part of the business process for your unit, there's going to be, similar to what's in the ENFA, there's going to be approvals that need to happen before the agreement can move forward. So we're going to use that to do that to accomplish that in the agreements module. We're going to use manage ancillary reviews. So the ancillary reviews, I think, was ASA's favorite functionality maybe. And what it allows us to do is essentially keep this record with Angela, but also request other people to put eyes on it and to approve the contents of what's in the record. So in this case, we're going to request that the PI, who happens to also be the department chair, excuse me. So it's sort of two birds with one stone from that perspective. Now, I will say, you need to check with your unit, your school or unit on what the business process is for what layers of approval are going to be required. Some may have a dean's office approval, some may be department chair and dean's office. I think the PI always needs to certify it. And so there's various different combinations depending on your school or unit. But there should be information from your unit's leadership on what that structure is. But what's nice about the system is there's flexibility to accommodate various different business processes. In this case, we're going to assume PI, department chair, and school approval. So I'm going to submit this to the PI. Dr. Moskala. And the review type. So within ancillary reviews, we have a lot of different review types, and a lot of these are going to enable OSP to contact the various offices in the research ecosystem to ensure that we have compliance approvals and that the appropriate offices see and approve of anything that we're accepting in an agreement. In this case, we're going to leverage this functionality to ensure that the agreement itself has been approved. So PI certification is the category we're going to select. We are going to say that a response is required. Sending a notification now is just going to generate an email to the PI with a link directly to where the PI needs to approve, and then any supporting documentation.
So Bill, we have a few questions in the chat that might be easier to kind of go over verbally. So one of the questions that came up was, getting the PI involved in filling out the SMART form. And so there is two ways to go about that in this pre-submission state. When we were in the SMART form, at the top right, there was a print button that will print the questions at least, and you could use that, download it, email it to the PI. This ancillary review process that Bill is walking through right now. So answering two questions, agreements don't automatically route to anyone. And so we do need to add the PI, the department and school, using ancillary review to route for their approvals, because there's no automatic way the system does it. But we can also use this not only to get approval, but to say, please look at the agreement and fill out, this question because I didn't know how to answer it. And so the PI will have the ability to go in and edit the agreement and add more information as a way to work together with the person, the research administrator helping. And so that will allow you to alert the PI that there's something that they need to go in and either add detail to or review. So while Bill's walking through this ancillary review, you'll kind of see how that process works. And let me see if there was another question. So the print function will print the form even without it being completed. It does not provide the answers though for any drop downs. It just prints the questions. There is no automatic notification for PI to approve. That's what we're showing. And if you select no for send notification now, I don't know, Bill, do you know what happens if you select no for number 4?
That's a good question, because my understanding is an ancillary review will generate a email no matter what. But that's one we should follow up on.
Any other questions about those? If your PI will complete the form themselves, then we'll be able to see that in the history. And Bill, you wouldn't require additional PI ancillary review if the PI filled it out, because it'll be in their name under the history tab.
No, I mean, if the PI is the one actually submitting, then no.
Yep.
I mean, it's no different than the ENFA in that we want to ensure that the PI is aware of and approves of all of the contents of what's in the action. So if that comes through the ancillary review or the submission itself from the PI, then either of those works. Okay, so I we'll follow up on that piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point, because if this is not triggering a notification to the PI by selecting no, that could be an issue, because obviously, as we know, it's not like PIs are hanging out in the system, and having them to ensuring that they're notified that there's an action required will be important to keep us on track and make sure we have a timely submission.
Yeah, and remember, everyone needs to remember that we're in the agreements module, which is built and functions different than the modules that we've been looking at on the grant side. So proposals and awards has different workflow. There's different email notifications that happen versus on this agreement side. And so I think we talked about on the proposal and award side that a lot of automatic emails get sent to the PI. It's not the same on this side. It's built slightly differently. And so that's kind of why we're walking through this ancillary review process and the other steps. Okay, I think that's all the questions for now, Bill. Thanks for the tangent.
No problem. Okay, so I have submitted those two ancillary reviews. If you go on the history tab, which is really the best place to look at for just like a chronological itemized description of what's happened, and Asa will show you more of that when he goes into the his piece, but just wanted to show that those were submitted. So now, now those parts are out to the two other parties that are approving. And this should be, according to the school's business process, we won't submit this until the approvals come through. So once those do come through, and ASA was working in the background to approve them. Okay. So you can pull up in the Manage Ancillary Reviews, see that they were both accepted. And as well as in the History tab, where you can see the author. Oh, no, sorry, that was just that I submitted them. So yes, when you navigate to the, and you, I believe will get a notification as well that that was completed. And so then from there, you have gotten the approvals to submit the agreement. And the only remaining step is to submit the agreement to OSP. So that will submit the agreement. It will do one final error testing and request some attestation as to the information that's been submitted. We're going to click OK. Okay, so now this, you'll see that this moves from the pre-submission to the unassigned state. It is now with OSP in an unassigned queue that will then be assigned by OSP's administrators. And then once it's assigned, it will go to in review for the negotiation piece in this box, signing, and then on to active. So that's the sort of how to, all the ingredients to bake the cake. And now we can shift over to ASA to kind of pull the cake out of the oven and show you a bit more of the functionality.
Thanks, Bill. I am going to go ahead and pull the cake out of the oven.
I'm sorry, I know we're supposed to be using the chat, but I just have a quick question. So when you submit the agreement, you have to go in and put the ancillary reviews, which doesn't make sense to me. It should be automatic for the PI, and in our case, the School of Medicine, the Office of Grants and Contracts. When the PI certifies and grants and contracts, are they the one that hits submit and it kicks it off to OSP? Or do we have to go back into the system and hit submit? That part's confusing.
It's the latter. You would go back in the system and hit submit. You'd get that email notification saying this is the ancillary reviews are approved, and then you'd go in and submit. Depending on School of Medicine OGC's edit rights within the agreement, they may be able to submit themselves, and that's something that we need to test. There might be a way that we can make sure that they have the right role so they could submit themselves, so we save that step. But right now the process would be that you would go back in and submit.
Thank you.
And Jen is asking, she said she doesn't see non-funded agreement in the drop down. I think it's because the agreement types are primarily non-funded. And so we specify the different agreement types.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things that I'm going to cover here, is that we have gotten into much more granular detail with the agreement types that we have. So rather than being funded or non-funded, we now have the specific types of non-funded agreement, as well as a few categories of funded agreement. So as Bill mentioned, I'm pulling the fully baked cake out of the oven. You'll see that it is in the active state, which means that the agreement has been fully executed. Not only that it's been submitted to OSP, but to take you through this initial map. So when Bill left it off, it was in the unassigned state, which went into what is currently kind of known as the queue. It will then be assigned based on portfolio or OSP's method for assigning contracts. The different places that it can go from there. Obviously, this map is not exhaustive, but it gives pretty general descriptions of the state that the negotiation is in. So from unassigned, the OSP central office can request further clarification, which is to say that if there are details about the agreement smart forms itself, they can ask for additional information. Or for example, if either there's no PI certification or there's no certification from the submitting school, they can send it back and it will then request that additional information. Once it gets assigned to a specific negotiator, it goes into the in review state. The negotiator can then reach back out to the submitting department or school for additional information, or they can begin the negotiation. It will be in review, whether it is being reviewed internally at UVA or whether it's with a sponsor. That's a little bit more part of another training that we'll do, where we kind of show everything that happened between Bill's piece of this presentation and mine, and that describes the actual negotiation piece and all of the different statuses you'll see there, as well as the DocuSign execution process. So I'll put in a plug for that additional piece. It will then go into signing, which is another part of that other training. And then once it is fully executed, it goes into this active state. So I will, as Bill was before, I'm impersonating the submitting research administrator to show what the workspace will look like from that perspective. Different roles in this system have different permissions of what they can do at different stages in the submission, negotiation, and post-execution process. But here, the most common is this role, which you'll see all of this available information, as well as a limited number of actions that you can take. One of the first things I want to point out is that the record is still fully visible. So everything that happened from submission through negotiation is still visible. You'll be able to see any correspondence that was logged here, the history, including all of the changes that were made, the date that it was signed, ancillary reviews, all of that sort of thing. You can still find the contacts that were provided, and part of this is from the agreement smart form, which I'll show you what that looks like now, as well as the internal contacts. The snapshots tab shows different versions of the agreement form at different states. So if you log back in and made any changes, it will record that as a new version of the snapshot. Another thing that you still have the ability to do, even post activation, is the manage relationships function, which I'll get to. And that's another feature. If it weren't for ancillary reviews, I think manage relationships would be the feature that I'm most excited about, because this allows us to connect projects that otherwise would not be clearly connected. In legacy ResearchUVA, you essentially have a research idea where you might have a funding proposal followed by a notice of award, internal actions, outgoing subcontracts, so on and so forth. But there's this kind of wall between funded and non-funded actions or agreements. But in this new system, you can connect anything. You can connect a funding proposal to a non-funded material transfer agreement, to an outgoing subaward. If they're all part of the same project, you can use the manage relationships functionality to connect those, and they'll all be linked here. So in any of those projects that you open, it will show the entire kind of network of related projects. Here, you'll also see documents that were uploaded throughout the submission. There are a few limited places where you can include those documents, and they'll all show up here. And then in addition, the DocuSign tab, which will show you the date that the agreement was signed by internal and external parties, assuming we're using DocuSign internally. Let's see. So another thing I wanted to note is the agreement number and title. So you'll see up here, it's MT followed by a number of zeros and then 22. This goes to the point of the level of specificity that we've gotten into. And when Bill was presenting the PowerPoint, you saw that there was a large table of acronyms and abbreviations. That's because instead of what we've had under the legacy ResearchUVA system, which is a research idea, we now have this agreement ID, which is the agreement type, generates the prefix, and then the number, the sequential order in which it was submitted in the system. So as soon as you begin submitting, you're assigned an agreement ID number, and that will be the thing that you use to check. So we're hoping that that actually eases some of the navigation when you're looking for an old agreement. So if you know that you're looking for example, a confidentiality agreement, you'll know the prefix right away, and it'll be just a smaller universe of potential agreement IDs to navigate. Some other information that you'll have access to, you'll see the date that you began the submission. You'll see when it was actually submitted to the unassigned queue. You'll see the latest time that it was changed. When we do execute the agreement and activate it, we have the opportunity to input the effective and expiration dates. And then you'll also see all of this kind of more general information, including right here at the top is where you'll be able to access the final fully executed agreement, which we'll upload in a new tab and show the date it was signed. And if you ever need a copy of the fully executed agreement, it's available right there on the workspace. Let's see. So just showing a few of the functions that you have access to from this workspace. If you click on View Agreement, this opens the agreement smart form, but you'll notice that you can no longer modify it because the agreement is active. So any modifications wouldn't have an impact on what we've actually executed. But this is a place to go in and kind of see what information you have submitted and what wound up being executed. You can exit from there. As Mary Beth mentioned, there's a print version, which is just a little bit more printer friendly, and it shows you, but it's basically the same information that we looked at before. You can look at all the correspondence, which is what's available in the correspondence tab. Manage access, and I did skip create amendment, but we'll get to that later. You can manage access where if you want somebody in another department or organization to have access to the record, you can just add them as a collaborator. Note that this can be done even after execution and activation. You can contact the owner. So you'll see that the owner is the OSP contract negotiator who negotiated the agreement. If after negotiation and execution, you have questions about the agreement that you need to be addressed, you can contact the owner directly in the system, and it will send them a notification. You can include any documents if needed. This is another feature that is going to be really helpful. It's copy agreement. And what this does is allows you to take all of the information that you submitted on the smart form, and rather than having to painstakingly resubmit it, if you have a number of similar agreements, let's say that you're sending the same or roughly the same materials to 4 or 5 different institutions, you can just you can fill it out once and copy that agreement as many times as you like, and it copies all of that information. You can change the title. You can edit each one of those forms as needed if you need to go in and make some small changes, but this should be a major time saver. And then, as I mentioned before, there's managed relationships. So there's the create amendment button as well. This can only be used after activation and only if there is not another amendment currently pending. So basically, once you click this button, any amendment, any information or changes that need to be made to the underlying agreement either need to be made in that single amendment or after that first amendment is executed. But otherwise, that button will appear anytime post execution. Let's see. I already mentioned the tabs, and yeah, these are all of the different things that you can do after the agreement has been executed. Not as much as I thought. So I am going to turn it over to Matt for a demonstration for Outgoing Subawards.
Hey, Asa, before Matt takes over, would you mind showing the manage relationships activity?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, so you might notice the agreement that Bill was working on was had a slightly different title because I made this one a few days ago and Bill just made his. So I think the easiest one to manage is that maybe we're getting 2 different shipments of the same material. So you can click manage relationships and search for the other one.
All right, Mary Beth, are we ready to go to the next step then?
Go for it.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and take over the screen sharing. So, okay, so everyone should be able to see my dashboard for Huron. Is that showing up? Get a thumbs up from Bill or Asa. All right, cool. So the way that we're going to walk through this today is basically going to be the process that is going to replace the SP30. So the process that we're going to walk through is just going to be from the department perspective, how are you going to request a subaward from OSP in the new system? And you saw 2 different approaches to start an agreement from Bill and Asa. And the way that we're going to request an outgoing subaward is actually from the grants module. So whereas the other one started in agreements, we're going to start in grants because for an outgoing subaward, you know, you should have an active award through which to request that subaward off of. So I've actually already gone in prior to this meeting and picked one that I thought would work well. Just a pretty basic NIH award. So the first I clicked on grants and then I clicked on awards, and I had already searched, you know, using that wild card that Bill had mentioned earlier. So in order to open up a, you know, your award, once you search to it, you click on the name. So this is going to take us to the award workspace. You can see up on the right as the award number. It's going to have basic information such as, you know, how much has been funded on the award and, you know, the dates, sponsor award numbers, basic things that you probably would think, you know, in current state to see in ResearchUVA if we were to click on the award in ResearchUVA. But from here, this is actually where you'll start the SP30 subaward request process as you currently know it. So from here, you're going to click on Create Agreement. And that'll create agreement that is associated with the award that you're on. So you need to make sure that you're on the actual award that you want to request a subaward off of. And we saw this list earlier, but you'll go down to Outgoing Subaward and make sure you select that. So what that is going to do is going to actually kick off an agreement that is related to this award. So in order to find it, you need to click on Related Projects. And it is somewhat confusing because if you notice, there's also a Subawards tab, but that is actually a different delivered Huron product. And for a number of reasons, it was decided that we needed to go with, you know, what we're currently showing you. So subawards are going to show up as related projects. I know that we're looking to see how we can, you know, make things as clear as possible for all users. But so yeah, it'll be under related projects. And you may have to refresh because it sometimes takes around 30 seconds for the subaward to show up. So yeah, there it is. From where I clicked on create agreement, this has now shown up under related projects. And once again, like Asa had mentioned with the agreement number, it's going to give your agreement a code based on what type of agreement it is. So this is a subaward, and then just a sequential numbering following that. All right, so this is the agreement workspace for the subaward. And now we're going to get to basically entering the information that you would have entered on an S230 in the current state. So you go over here to the left and click Edit Agreement. And it's going to auto-populate certain things. This should look pretty familiar based on what we just saw. It's just, the same general, looks like there's someone else checking out my subaward right now. So hopefully that doesn't cause any issues. But so it'll auto-populate the PI. So this is our PI, and it's going to pull over from the active award from which we started this process off of. The administrative contact, like before, is going to auto-populate with the person who's completing it. So, I would not be the administrative contact as somebody from OSP, but right now I'm kind of pretending to be a department administrator. So that's why my name is in there. The upload agreement draft, this was also explained before, but so for any other agreement, you may have a draft for subawards. We're generally always going to check that it's going to be generated internally, and that's because it's OSP's responsibility to generate these subawards. We're not going to have a draft subaward agreement from any subrecipients. The only thing that you may have very specific instances like Virginia Catalyst where there's a different draft, but a good rule of thumb is just always check this box. So then this will be the title. It's just going to kind of pull from the award that you created this request off of. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. And sub to Michigan. I don't know, just something so that it'll be easily identifiable moving forward. Description, like anything else, we would just include, what you're looking to do with this. And then supporting documents, this is where you would actually add in, any attachments like that's currently required on SP30. So we're talking SOW, budget justification. We should be able to pull the consortium commitment form from the proposal file. But so that's where that would all be. For me, most recently, I've just been putting pictures of dogs in there for training purposes. So you can drag and drop files into there. You don't have to click and then navigate. But for my own demo purposes, I've been using dog photos because they just work for me. So then the next question to round out the first page is regarding providing funding to an outside party just for goods and services. This should always be a no, and essentially the idea is if it's a yes, then it's a procurement action and not an outgoing subaward. So this is kind of a stop, in terms of QC, that if this is just goods and services and not a subaward, then you wouldn't want to move forward. Okay, so as you continue, you're going to see, like Bill had mentioned earlier, that you can choose your counterpart from this field. And this is going to be your subrecipient. So I'm going to choose Michigan State, even though I titled the thing Michigan. So I didn't see University of Michigan in the list. So just going to keep plugging along. New counterparty name, like we mentioned before, if for whatever reason your subrecipient isn't in the list, this is how you'd request info team to add it. And then, yeah, you're just going to put in contact information as previously. The responsible department pre-populates from, you know, whoever you were, the PI's org, I believe, when you were starting the submission, like we saw on the previous page. And then agreement collaborators would be the other people maybe in your department who also need to be able to review this form. Additional counterparties for subawards, I don't think it's something that we're going to use that much. But that would be where, you know, if there was a third party to the subaward, I've seen instances where the subrecipient wants two separate parties to sign. You know, maybe that could be a place to include it, but it's not a required field. And before I move forward, I don't have the chat pulled up. Are there any items that we need to address before going to the next page?
Nope.
Good. Okay, great. So firing forward. Agreement information. So this is going to match the sponsor for the award that you built this off of. So it was one of the NIHs for this award. Just for the interest of saving time, I'm just going to pick one of them and move forward. But yeah, this should always match the award. Just in, you know, the current state, this subaward is always funded by the, you know, prime award. So project title, this would more likely be the scientific title on the actual prime award. But since I don't have an example, that's going to be the fill in. And essentially from these fields are mapped from the templates that we use to make subawards. So this, even though we're going through these steps now, it's going to make the agreement processing and creation a lot faster down the line. So this would be the FAIN for a federal award, or, you know, whatever agreement number is if we were doing non-federal. And then we're getting to subrecipient direct and indirect costs. So it's going to auto total up the current period costs. Let's say we're having a 2-year subaward and we anticipated it, you know, being 150 each year. So we can always go ahead and put in the estimated total cost there as well. Our prime agreement cycles on September 1st. So I'm going to pull that down. And then once again, this estimated project is the full period of performance, not just the single year budget period. Now, once you finish those questions, and also keep in mind, all these can be reviewed and will be reviewed and edited by OSP following submission. So, you know, it's just like the SP30 where you're putting in information of what you're anticipating. But if at any point it changes, we can always edit it and update and control for quality down the road. Questions 15 and onward are skipped at this stage because remember, we're just doing the SP30 portion. These answers are completed by OSP following our background administrative task and its compliance reviews. So we would be able to check to see, you know, the risk assessment levels, and we would actually upload the risk assessment form to the subaward smart form. And the subaward ID, that is how the subrecipient will invoice for payment. So in current state, you know, it's the Oracle's award number followed by either a PO number or a subproject number. Future state, this will be connected to a supplier contract out of Workday. But yeah, that's completed by OSP. So these questions can be skipped. So now we get to the regulatory questions. You'll see if you select yes, it's going to open more questions and information, and where you could upload either an IRB approval, an exemption, or an explanation as to, hey, we won't get this till year 2. We'll have a restriction on human subjects for year 1, or you know, you need to get it from the subrecipient. Anything that you need to have in this box, just to give us a heads up as to where the IRB approval will come from. To keep it simple for my demo, I'm just going to select no, and you'll see these questions go away. Vertebrate animals is going to mirror the human subjects just with I and Cook. And then human subject data, this is a little bit more than we've currently been able to gather. And this is based off of the FTP attachment 7 that we're now able to use to incorporate data transfer terms on subawards. So if you were transferring human subjects data, you'd be able to include this information up front, and you know, it would speed things along downstream. This page is only for amendments, which we're not covering during today's demo, so we can actually skip those. But just as a short explanation, this is currently a request for a new subaward. If you were doing this smart form for an amendment, all the other pages would be automatically filled in from the initial request. And so you would only have to complete the amendment information page here, which just basically says, what do you want to do? And, you know, supporting information. So for now, we can skip it because it's just it's a new subaward request. Okay, now we're to the part that we've seen before, where you have 2 steps. You're going to click validate to make sure that everything is a green checkbox. And then once you have validate, you can click finish. And we're back to the workspace for the subaward request. It has not yet been submitted. You know, it's just like the previous, where you need to actually come in and hit submit. We will be using ancillary reviews in the same manner for the other agreements to ensure that depending on where you are at UVA, you're going to have a different approvals process. You know, some schools have department level, school level, PI. Wherever you are for your SOPs, ancillary reviews is where we're going to cover that review and approval. But you can go ahead and hit submit, and this is where you'll have the same attestation as you saw before. And once you hit OK, this is now submitted to OSP and is floating around in the unassigned queue to be reviewed and assigned out by the subawards manager. And that is the entire process for doing what is currently an SP 30. But this is how you'll request subawards in the future state. So the demo for subawards is actually pretty short because it's just showing the request from the department perspective and not the processing from OSP. So that's the cake baking. I didn't have a sous chef to do that for me, so we'll have to see that in a future meeting.
All right, so I think, Matt, if, well, let's see, are there any other questions to follow up on before we move forward into the breakout rooms?
Nope, I think just to reiterate that this is exactly like the current subaward request form. It's just now electronic. So our procedures and policies haven't changed. We're just having you submit it electronically to us. So I think there were a few questions about that, but I think I've answered all of them. So I think we're ready to go.
I think one question was about starting this from the agreements module, not the grants module.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
I do have an updated version of that. I think, did everyone get an updated email for materials this morning? Or was that not sent to everybody? Because I think the most recent version of the walkthrough should have starting at the award workspace for outgoing subaward.
Yeah, I'm looking at the one that's on my calendar invite, and it does have the updated version.
Okay, but regardless, I'll be in the room for whoever joins to do the subaward demo, and I can walk you through it. It's no problem.